There we are. Let's do this.
We're live now.
Yeah, we're live now. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, we're live.
That's what was,
Sorry,
let's do this.
the
Okay.
let's do this was the hey, we're live. I probably should have made something
okay.
a little bit more specific, but
Just do that hand motion. Just put a camera in the
back. And we're live. It's Wayne's
Los
World.
Locos kick your. Oh,
sorry.
Okay. We're doing it again.
Go ahead. It's all you.
World bit. It is the Wayne's World bit, isn't it? Which one is it? Number 2? It's number 2, right?
No, that's the first one. When they go to the big
one?
when they get to the studio.
Oh, because he's doing the commercial for the Noah's Arcade thing. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, and their camera guy has never worked in a big studio before, so they teach him remember the 5, the countdown. Yep. You go 5, 4, 3.
Yep. And then he's nodding. Yeah. Anyways. Los Locos kick your ass. Los Locos kick your face. Los Locos kick your balls into outer space. Hello, folks. What better place can you find a couple of assholes giving subpar amateur critique of films old and new than right here on the internet with us? I'm Dirty Invincible.
And I'm Macron. And
we're
the
plot holes.
Plot holes. Okay, eventually we will get that. We're going to take some time and go to camp or something like that. Something to teach us to speak in sync, right?
We just need the guy... the camera guy.
We need the camera guy.
We need the nods.
We got to get someone to cue us up.
Yeah, we need host C here. Host quizzes.
Oh yeah, we got to get the quizzes involved.
To do the nods. Yeah. Do he can do the nod for us. Anyways, so Macron, what's on the menu today?
Today we are poking some holes in the nostalgia bomb known as Short Circuit 2. It was filmed from 1988. It's kind of a follow-up to our previous one. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but for right now, let's just dive in real quick. Summary of the movie. Overly long summary of the movie here for a moment.
Well, it is an overly long movie, so that's fair.
It is a surprisingly long movie. So we open up with Ben Javeri, played by Fisher Stevens, selling toys on the streets of New York City in the shape of Johnny Five, or Number 5 as we knew him from the last movie, up until the very end, last line of the movie, essentially. There he's on the street selling toys. He meets Fred, played by Michael McKean, who's selling fake Rolexes near him, and they kind of strike up a little bit of a back and forth banter. While that's happening, Sandy, who's played by Cynthia Gibb, finds this one of the mini Johnny Five toys that Ben has been producing, has made its way up to her office. She works for a toy store, which I forgot to write the name down of, but I don't think it's an actual toy store, so it doesn't really matter.
I only actually cared about their company, which is like Titanic Toys. And I blanked on the name of that company too.
Right?
They're not important.
So Sandy is the assistant buyer for this toy store, this big toy store. And she's looking for the maker of this little toy and runs across Ben, finds his little stall with all the other ones. And she's like, oh, hey, you're the one that made this. And starts negotiating with Ben and Fred for 1,000 of these Johnny Five toys. Ben, of course, can't make them in time. So Fred, quick talks his way into getting the company to give them a little bit of time there, and they immediately expand their operations. Fred goes and gets a loan from a loan shark and uses that to rent a dilapidated building and hire a bunch of people who look like they're either down on their luck or maybe even homeless to come and be the production line for the Johnny Five toys. While they're doing this, a pair of robbers who've been digging a tunnel from the building they just rented to the bank across the street to rob the bank find out that there's someone in this building now, and it's going to be hard for them to dig this tunnel. So they try to scare Fred and Ben away by attacking their operation and kind of successfully drive off their workers and break a bunch of their equipment, which they had spent all the money that Fred had on. And so Ben and Fred are pretty disheartened by this. But luckily, shortly after that happens, Johnny Five shows up, sent by Stephanie and Newton from the first movies, to help build the toys. I don't remember why exactly either or when exactly Ben contacted them to get Johnny Five sent, but they knew that he was building toys and needed help, so they sent Johnny Five. He reads a little letter.
He did say that he talked to them. I was wondering about, did they just send it? No, he
okay.
Did reach out.
Okay. So Johnny Five immediately gets to work and completes a large number of toys overnight, and then wakes Ben up, letting him know that he needs to recharge. And while he's recharging, Ben's talking to him about his upgrades. And so he goes through his list of upgrades, which includes a bat belt like utility pack on his back in place of the laser that was there last movie. He also has a remote control, which is going to be very important. It's a Chekhov's remote control, I believe, is what this would be. It uses it to like make some of the little Johnny Five toys dance. While
a 500-hour lithium argon liquid battery. Thank you.
Lithium argon liquid battery. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yes, which will
and,
also be important. That's Chekhov's liquid battery later.
Yeah. And then 500 megabytes.
500
kind
megabytes.
Of also important, but not really.
Hey,
that's 500 megabytes of online memory or something like that.
That's a lot of personality for a robot.
Yeah.
So while Ben goes to meet with Sandy, who he's clearly enamored with, Johnny Five realizes that he's in a city and leaves to go sightseeing. Fred trying to stop him, but not being super effective at it because Johnny Five is a robot and Fred is a human who could be trapped in a trash can. On the street, Johnny Five runs into hustlers and tourists. He runs into Los Locos gang members who have their own jaunty intro tune that they sing to vacant lots before they do crimes.
Yep.
Which we heard at the start of the thing here, but delightfully played by Dirty. Yep. That was an excellent rendition. Thank you. He also eventually runs into Oscar, who's played by Jack Weston. He's a elderly man who works at the bank across the street from the building that Ben and Fred are using. And he also, as part of meeting the Los Locos and finding culture on the streets of New York, adorns himself in neon spray paint and black leather and has kind of a punkier attitude coming out of this. When Ben sees this, Ben chides him like a child about the paint job and running around in the city. Fred explains to Johnny Five that he was scammed into stealing radios for Los Locos after Johnny Five explains what he's been doing while he was out during the day. Then shortly after that, the robbers show up again to smash the toy production, seeing as how it hasn't left or made it easier for them to get to the tunnel that they're trying to dig. But this time they run into Johnny Five, who is trained apparently in slapstick combat, and chases them off in a rather funny manner. Eventually, Oscar and Fred, Oscar starts coming by occasionally, and Oscar and Fred have a conversation. Oh, good.
Well, while they're in doing that, Johnny Five was like writing Steph a note and sending her and Newton a chili dog in the mail.
Oh yeah, that's right. Please see attached chili dog.
Yes. I've attached something called a chili dog.
So while Oscar and Fred have been talking, because Oscar keeps coming by, they start talking about the value of Johnny Five, and Johnny explains that he knows his exact value, and he says he's worth a little over $11 million. I think it was $11,002,000.
He states it to the cent.
Yeah, he states it down to the cent, but $11 million-ish. That Oscar and Fred, both at that point in time, their eyes kind of go wide, and both of them start working on plans in their own head to sell off Johnny Five. Fred, while Ben is out trying to talk to Sandy again, I believe. Fred tries to sell Johnny Five. He takes him out to some other company. It's not named, but it's like he's meeting with executives and whatnot. He's going to take Johnny Five there, and they're going to potentially put a bid in on Johnny Five. But in the meantime, on the way, Fred finds out why it's so hard to control Johnny Five, beyond the fact that he's a sentient being. But like they see a bookstore, and Johnny gets distracted and partially destroys the bookstore trying to access input.
More inputs.
More input. So eventually, Fred gets him back on track, gets him to the building. They go up, they meet the executives, and when Johnny Five realizes that Fred is trying to sell him, he gets upset and ends up backing out of a window in this skyscraper. And from nowhere, a hang glider pops out of Johnny Five, and he floats down to the ground gently.
Yep.
Then that same hang glider disappears magically, while still being there, I assume, but never to be mentioned again. So Johnny Five, this whole time, Johnny Five has been kind of noticing that people are like shocked by him. Some of them disturbed. Some people. I believe a couple in the park critiquing some art sculptures call him angular and
repulsive.
Repulsive, yeah. I believe, yeah.
And then we get some sad Minecraft music playing at that.
Yeah, and he wanders off and starts like trying to find trying to figure himself out. He ends up in a Catholic church giving confession and gets chased out by the priest once the priest realizes he's a robot. And eventually he gets arrested by the police, who have no idea what to do with him. They put him in
he does the
property.
Like, Merchant of Venice tirade, but like replacing Jew with robot,
in
Shylock from
the police department.
Yeah,
right? Okay.
Yeah, he starts going off. Yeah, just word replace Jew with robot, and then at the end he goes, if I pick, do I not bleed? The answer's like, yeah, battery fluid.
You don't bleed, buddy. It's hard to prick him in general with all that metal. So the police realize, he obviously at some point gives the police some information about where he's from or who he's been living with, and so the police go to find Ben. They take him to the police station. He picks up Johnny Five, who's been put in the stolen property. He's been chained up in stolen property, essentially.
Yeah, he's reading a book to more sad Minecraft music.
Yeah, he's got the
Minecraft
two books.
Music makes it often returned.
Right. He and he's reading two books too, Frankenstein and what was the other one?
I can't remember what the other one was.
But another book about being a creation and lonely in the world, essentially. And this leads to Ben, when he's taking Johnny Five home. They kind of are walking along the waterfront back to the building. And they actually have like probably one of the more like, it's very poignant, but probably one of the better parts of the movie is Ben and Johnny Five talking about what loneliness means while living in a city like New York, surrounded by millions of people.
Which Ben totally hijacks the conversation to talk about his girlfriend problem.
Ben turns it around.
Girlfriend problems, right?
Right? That's the problem with humans, right? Robots trying to have a nice intellectual conversation about the sadness of life. Humans just want to talk about boning. So eventually, Johnny Five talking to Ben, they figure out a way to help Ben go on this manufactured date with sorry, I skipped part.
The robbers,
the robbers. I skipped over some of our notes here. The robbers, in the meantime, are meeting up to discuss what to do about the people in the building and the robot, and we find out that Oscar is actually leading the robbers. Surprise!
Which was kind of foreshadowed in the very beginning of the movie. You open up with this plane landing, and it's got this police escort to this bank, and Oscar's there, like eating a sandwich, like and gawking over the scene. And you eventually see them like lead this guy in to the bank with like a briefcase handcuffed to him, and he's got, it turns out, this famous collection of diamonds, or supposedly famous. I don't know if it's like in universe famous or if it's actually a thing, but the Vanderveer collection of diamonds, and they're being stored at this bank vault. That's got all these security measures in it, and so that's what these crooks have been using the warehouse for, is to
Yeah.
dig a tunnel into that vault for those jewels. And so Oscar working at the bank is kind of like the inside guy.
Yep.
Um,
But he's also kind of the
yeah,
the ringleader of this group because he's the one kind of
yeah,
calling the shots in this meeting here. Um,
and he's also playing a distraction to Johnny
yeah,
Five throughout the whole
yeah.
thing as well. And so, yeah,
Well, and he's met Johnny Five now, so he's him and they have a good rapport. So that leads into what happens eventually. So after that meeting there, we see Ben going on this kind of manufactured date with Sandy. Johnny Five helping by by writing words up on a electronic billboard so that Ben can read them to Sandy, and he's listening in with his little I don't know, shotgun microphone thing that he has.
very like Cyrano de Bergerac style.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads to like it's obviously a comedy of errors ensues, and they kind of they kind of go off on their own. Johnny Five not following them at this point, or help Ben, and they kind of connect over their love of classic American music, and they stay out all night dancing and partying and whatnot. While Ben and Sandy are having their fun in the morning, Oscar talks to Johnny Five and convinces him to help dig a tunnel to the bank as by telling him that, oh well, we want to protect Ben, right? He's our friend.
Well,
So
he plays a distraction to Johnny Five. He's like, "Hey,
yeah,
Johnny," and tries to get him around the corner.
yep,
And then when Ben warehouse, the two other guys come in, kidnap them,
yeah,
lock them up in a Chinese restaurant refrigerator. While
yep.
Oscar is then, now that the thieves have got the two out of the way, that's where Oscar then comes in. It's like, okay, how can we keep Ben safe? We can put him in a secret tunnel,
We can build this
and so
tunnel, and it'll have a protected room in it.
yeah,
So so with Johnny Five digging the tunnel, and Ben and Fred locked up in this freezer in this Chinese food restaurant. Um, they Ben and Fred are trying to figure out a way to get out, and they find that there's a phone line somehow for some reason run inside this freezer. It's not connected to anything, but they're able to use a pocket. Ben's able to use a pocket calculator to get a signal out and basically dial Sandy and leave her clues in the form of classic American music, like I don't know, tunes. I guess I would call that, like whatever you could do with a phone keypad to emulate music. Um. So So with when Johnny Five, while this is all going on, Johnny Five's still digging the tunnel. Eventually, he gets to the room or to the bank vault. Oscar convinces him to cut a hole in the bank vault, and then gets him to help take the safe deposit box that the jewels are in. And then at the same time, Johnny Five starts to realize that, hey, this is wrong. That Ben is or that Oscar is stealing from the bank, and that this is a problem. And so they start to have an argument, and the other robbers show up back up after having dropped off Ben and Fred at the Chinese food restaurant freezer. And they attack Johnny Five, and a little chase ensues where Johnny Five is chasing down Oscar, and the robbers are chasing Johnny Five. Eventually, Johnny Five corners Oscar, and the robbers are able to get the upper hand and kind of surprise Johnny Five and start smashing him to pieces in the middle of the street. And they leave him essentially for dead with a leaking battery, and in pieces. And he starts crawling away, broken and surely on the edge of death, essentially. As close to the edge of death as a robot.
Sad Minecraft music,
Yeah, exactly.
More sad Minecraft music.
So Fred finds Johnny Five hobbling along in an alleyway, and Johnny's not able to really
Well, so
communicate with him. Oh, good.
Sandy finds Fred and Ben through the clues, musical clues,
Yeah.
and they go back to the warehouse. The police are there waiting for them from the bank vault because they found out what went on.
Oh yeah,
And
and then
so
they
when
end up
they
with
arrive
the
at the warehouse, they're
police.
like, "There's magically a hatch in our warehouse that leads down to where?" And then the police come out and they're like, "Hey, hands up!" And meanwhile, Fred's like still looking around outside, sees the police, so he gets away while Ben and Sandy are taken away into custody. And
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, so Fred's the one that's how he's no longer
That's
in
how he
custody,
ends
but
up out on the
and being
street
able to
looking
go
for Johnny
find
Five
Johnny
still,
Five.
but not in custody,
Yeah,
not in police custody yet.
yeah.
So he finds him hobbling along in an alleyway, and they're near a Radio Shack, and Johnny Five, through using chalk to write on the wall, explains to Fred that he needs to fix him, at least enough that he can help fix himself. And so they go into the Radio Shack, and Johnny Five uses a terminal to kind of walk him through doing what he needs to do to fix him, including at one point, because his battery is leaking, Fred is wearing this silk shirt that he has talked about being a very expensive silk shirt throughout the movie. And he tears off one of the sleeves to kind of, help patch up Johnny Five's battery, which is, that's them kind of, coming to terms with each other and showing some mutual respect, I guess. So Fred helps fix up Johnny Five enough that Johnny Five can start to fix himself, and then Johnny Five starts, he gets his voice back, but his memory's still a little wonky because of the battery drainage and the damage done to him. So he starts to punkify himself. He gets a
Yep.
little copper cable mohawk and a chain between his eye and his something on somewhere on his chest. I think it was connected. I didn't. It was just very funny. Chain,
Which
additional chain.
it's a great turning point for the character of Johnny Five at this point, because up until then he has just kind of been this happy-go-lucky. If anything, like if he did anything in self-defense, it wasn't really malicious. It was just to like defend. But here he's out for blood now.
Now he wants vengeance. This is definitely
he wants vengeance.
This is him turning around and going like, all right, this is it. We're gonna mess these guys up.
He thought like one of his best pals in the world, Oscar, just stabbed him in the back. Like,
right.
So yeah, he's lost it.
So,
well, not only that, but it's like, I think it was at the moment when he was like, wait, they trapped you guys in a freezer, but they tried to destroy me.
He realizes that,
like, what the hell?
They just tried to stop. They just like put Ben and Fred somewhere where they would just stay until someone came and got them, and that would keep them out of the action for a little while. But with Johnny Five, they were like, well, we're just going to kill you. That's how we're going to deal with it. And Johnny Five, very incensed by this, gets very angry. Rightfully so. I mean,
rightfully, yeah, definitely.
I'm not, no way minimizing the validity of Johnny Five's anger in this moment. But so a whole chase bit ensues. Ben and Sandy and with the police get the police to realize that, hey, the real person that stole the gems is still on the loose, and we need to find them. So Ben, Sandy, and the police are chasing after Oscar and the robbers. Johnny Five and Fred go to find Oscar and the robbers. When they catch up to them, there's a showdown. Johnny Five beats the crap out of the robbers and locks one of them up in a chain link fence and slams one on the ground. But in that time, Fred's been kind of watching Oscar, and Oscar punches Fred and gets away before Johnny can do anything. Yeah, sucker punches him. And it becomes this it's the whole ticking clock thing where Johnny Five's battery is leaking, so he's rapidly losing power, which the battery fluid in this looks a lot like blood, so I think that's meant to amp up your feelings of empathy towards Johnny Five here.
Yeah, and especially like when they're beating him up, like they bust him up pretty bad. Like one of the first hits that they get in is on that battery casing, and that one guy, Saunders, who's like a geek, who's geeking over
how awesome this giant robot is.
Right? Yeah. But he's one of the bad guys, so he's always reluctantly then just kind of go, okay, well, we got to do what we need to do. But like he gets in like one of the first good hits, and it squirts up that fluid on him. First off, like we'll say that for a hole maybe. But yeah, it's like it's meant to like, oh yeah, that's like
Oh,
blood, right?
it looks like a spray of blood.
Visualization that like he just hacked someone on the street, not a robot but a person, and so
Right.
they're really trying to like nail that home, like, oh yeah, the battery fluids is blood kind of thing.
Yeah, so he's they repeatedly show while he's chasing, like, oh, there's like drops of blood, drops of this battery fluid and stuff, and so yeah, it's very they play it up, so it becomes the ticking clock for the last act of the movie, and so it's kind of a race for time at this point for Johnny Five to catch Oscar, because Oscar's making it, making a getaway. He gets to a dock and jumps in a boat and starts taking off. Johnny Five sees this and starts to formulate a plan. He finds a power lifter and lifts himself up, and then sees a crane kind of over the dock area, and he uses the crane. He has a magnetic grapple that he had used earlier to stop a taxi cab. And he uses that to attach himself to the crane and swing down like Tarzan, which was another thing he had seen earlier in the movie. Swings down like Tarzan, grabs Oscar out of the boat, swings back to the dock, and drops him drops himself and Oscar off on the dock. The police and Ben and Sandy all get there while this is happening and see this go down, and they run up, and the police take Oscar, and Ben and Sandy are there with Johnny Five, and Ben is trying to come up with a way to save him, to keep him alive, and he realizes there's paramedics there that have a defibrillator, and that Johnny's losing power, and he needs a lot of power, so they use the defibrillator to power up Johnny and keep him powered until they can repair him, and with that, the day seems saved. We skip ahead. I believe at least it has
time for him to get repaired. I don't know how long.
Enough time for him to get both repaired and for them to build an entire company with logo and everything, get their own building and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
and get gold plated.
So we come back. Johnny Five. We open up with a little montage of newspaper clippings, and Johnny Five is like the talk of the world. They've started a new, Johnny Five, Fred, and Ben, and apparently Sandy have started a new company called Input Inc., which we walk past as Fred is working a deal over the phone and hanging out with Sandy. We walk past the sign for that on the building. We kind of cut over to a citizenship ceremony where people are being granted citizenship. I forgot to mention Ben's been working on his citizenship this whole time. There's been a big focus of him in this movie.
Yeah.
And so it pans over the crowd while you hear someone giving a speech about citizenship and what it means and all that stuff. And we see Ben, and then eventually we see Johnny Five, and this class of people gets inducted as U.S. citizens, and including a special mention for Johnny Five being the first robotic U.S. citizen. And then I believe it ends on a Johnny Five, who is all gilded in gold right now, jumps in the air, and then it fades to black to credits.
Yep.
So, aside from the obvious, why did we pick this movie? What was I believe. Oh, I'll start this one off. First off, every line I thought I remembered from Short Circuit was really from Short Circuit 2. So it's a good reason to do this one. I know I said that last time, but I just want to point that out. That like
same reason, yeah.
Well, watching Short Circuit 2, watching Short Circuit made me realize that. Watching Short Circuit 2 made me go, oh yeah, that's I genuinely, most of the things I remember about Short Circuit came from the second movie. And I think it was because it was like a Short Circuit 2 got a lot of TV play. It didn't do as well in the theaters as Short Circuit did, but the Short Circuit 2 got a ton of play on TV. But also, I feel like it's important because I have a lot of nostalgia around this movie. And watching the first movie kind of made me realize that some of that nostalgia is probably very unfounded. It's just, me being a kid and seeing a movie and having some, some kind of joy just from that memory of it. So I feel like it's like, this is like Short Circuit 2 compared to Short Circuit. I feel like Short Circuit was an okay movie. Short Circuit 2, I believe, is objectively bad. Like, it's not a good movie as a whole. But but there are like some sincere, like some very good scenes. Like I really feel like the Ben and Johnny Five scene talking about loneliness in New York City is like a really like important scene. And it's kind of the theme part a big part of the theme of the movie. Um, but you know, it gets by on the movie gets by on the fact that it had a lot of TV airtime when I was a child. So I feel like a lot of people from our generation are probably have fond memories of this movie and probably
For
have
sure.
fond memories that the movie doesn't necessarily deserve.
There's a lot of stuff that is like that for sure.
Right.
I, again, I think it's pretty obvious why we picked this one. We did one. We got to do part two. And we mentioned that we are going to do both short circuit movies together. So, yeah, and also, this is our first foray into a series. It's technically a series of two. So yeah, just starting off with a two-parter makes sense. And we'll do more series. Especially tackling the larger franchise. So don't you worry about that. We got you covered. Those are coming. We may or may not do them back to back like this for those really big ones like MCU, for example. But stuff like Short Circuit, obviously two-parter, easily we could do this together. But yeah, we do. We are going to tackle series, so keep in tune for more details for those later on. Yeah, and then I didn't think it was too bad of a movie. Obviously, yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia, but even like going through and taking notes, it wasn't like for me like The Creator where I was like having to pull teeth just to like get through it. I was enjoying myself going through the movie. So maybe it tickled my nostalgia feels in just the right way, just even watching again. And but trying to objectively look at it though, like I was surprised that there was a lot of actually internal consistency within the movie itself. There were continuity errors, which more on that later, but yeah, whatever. But also, punked out Johnny Five. How can you not like a punked out Johnny Five?
Like
You
right.
know, holy crap. And part of leading that is, or going my next point is, one of my favorite scenes from my childhood is the whole scene with Johnny Five chasing Oscar, set to "Holding Out for a Hero" by Bonnie Tyler, and even just watching it for this, like that scene still hits me in the feels. Like
That definitely
he's
warmed the heart.
yeah. Well, you look at it and you're like, here's this guy, this
This
robot,
guy. This guy.
this guy. So yeah, Johnny Five, he's happy-go-lucky, plucky guy. Suddenly, feels what it's like to have betrayal. Is now set on vengeance, and he is so set on vengeance that he is literally using the last minutes of his existence to fulfill his vengeance. And like that's what this whole scene like. It cuts to the battery pack all dramatically showing the time left, and it's like 5 minutes, 52 seconds left, and it's like the pressure's on. You're feeling it for him, right? Like and you're rooting for him for his little his vengeance trips there. you know
Yeah. You're like, yeah, smash that old guy. Yeah. No, I feel you on that. Definitely. Yeah. That was also. I think that and the loneliness scene are two of the best in the movie. Like it's like just that part. That one in particular is just it's that feel good energy of someone of like of someone short on time but handing out comeuppance to people who deserve it, right?
yeah. Yep.
So that's why we picked this. But now to the important part of the whole reason we do this podcast is what were the problems with this
Holes.
movie? Let's
Yeah.
start with some holes here. Let's start picking them apart.
So I did mention like there's actually a lot of internal consistency,
Yeah.
but not within the series itself. There's a big continuity error, and it's actually not with anything to do with Johnny Five or the company. Well, actually, there is one continuity error with that. But the main one is with Ben Tiny. I'll go back to the continuity error that's not Ben, and that is when they're describing where Nova Robotics was. I think Ben is describing it to Fred, and he says, "Yeah, I worked in Oregon." And as we found out from the last episode, no, it was Washington. It was a made up town in Washington that was on the border of Oregon, and a lot of the movie took place in Oregon in Astoria, but Nova Robotics was in Washington. It was on the plate,
I
on the
feel like
plate of
because
manufacture.
you're about to get into another one too that kind of the one that you're getting to here is going to also kind of cover this, but I just feel like there's a handful of issues I have with this movie that could have been resolved if anyone making this movie had watched the first one before deciding to produce this one. Right?
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
feel like it's like they
yeah.
just didn't watch it. They
Or
kind of like,
you
what do the
know,
actors remember about what happened? Let's just use that.
oh, the guy's name was Ben, but we didn't watch the credits to figure out what his last name is, which is our next continuity issue. Is Ben's family name issues? He's credited as Jabatuya, Ben Jabatuya in Short Circuit One, but we didn't really get introduced to him aside from just Ben. So that makes it
I
Ben or
believe he
Benjamin.
says his name in the first one though.
Does he?
Like
But it's
he,
like really fast
it's a
and
single scene.
throwaway
It's
as it
not. Yeah,
is.
I
Like,
don't think he keeps
yeah,
repeating it or anything like that. But it's a single scene where he actually says his name.
yeah, yeah. And then in Short Circuit Two, it's Jarvie. He's now Benjamin Jarvie. Uh, what?
Yeah,
Now,
like
what's even more confusing is like when I was like looking up to like make sure I wasn't like hallucinating. Like I looked on IMDb, and this is where it gets worse. IMDb has it credited as Javeri. So what? So yeah, I had to look in the actual credits in the movie to like definitely verify. Like, okay, everyone's just off here. But yeah, that's just what.
yeah, very
And then
what point?
while I was at IMDb, like there was actually a goof that they called it a goof, but it's definitely like a plot hole that they pointed out. It's a possible plot hole. And that is a contradiction of um, like the whole plot about Ben getting his citizenship in Short Circuit 2 kind of is contradictory to the fact that he worked for a military contractor for secret weapons, mind you, for the
Which
military.
I
And
have it, like why I don't understand why I understand that they wanted someone to be getting their citizenship in this so that they could have a tag along that Johnny Five could tag along on
or
that.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
But like they were just like, oh, the let's use the Indian guy who's already said he was born in the U.S. Again,
yeah,
if they just watched the first movie, they might not have done some of these things. But I
yeah.
feel like
Because I mean, in that first movie, like, and this goes on to another like problem with the continuity between these two. Like in Short Circuit One, there's that whole like gag about, oh, my family's from Bakersfield and originally Pittsburgh,
he's like, yeah, but where are you from
But then
originally? Oh, you
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
say
He's
originally.
like,
You
oh,
didn't say that. We already went over that one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Where are you from? Originally Bakersfield.
Yeah.
No, your family. Oh, Pittsburgh. And it's like, okay, yeah. But then when he's like consoling Johnny Five about loneliness, he says, when I left India, and it's like, wait a second, did you leave India or are you from Bakersfield? So it's like either they again, and I'm pretty sure it's this, like they just didn't do the research here, considering the whole family name issues and all that, and the whole just defense contractor thing status. Like it's either that or he was like doing the whole like, oh, Pittsburgh Bakersfield thing as a joke, like in character as a joke, and that he really was from India, but
Which
we won't really
I
know because but yeah,
and I would have bought that too. That's what I thought. That was my thought. Was even just watching the first one, I thought maybe he was making a joke because of how they played him up.
yeah,
But at the same time, I'm like, well, I feel like that was probably a much more respectful way of handling it if it wasn't a joke. If that's just the way it was, and then they just left it at that. But instead, no, he's now in this movie. He left India
yeah,
to come to the U.S., which again is this is the '80s, and there's it's kind of a like this is one of those movies that kind of tries to have that like kind of inspiring messaging about people wanting to be U.S. citizens and stuff like that from different parts of
yeah.
the world. So I mean, I get why they wanted to do it in the movie. It's like you're saying, like everything in this movie doesn't line up with what happened in the first movie.
Yeah, and I do want to like give some benefit to the doubt. Like, okay, maybe you can as a non-citizen work as a defense contractor, and so I did my research, And yeah, you actually can like work for a contractor as a non-citizen, but it has to do like when it starts getting into top secret stuff, especially like weapons projects. That's where it starts like, okay, no, those are usually given to citizens. But that said, there are notable exceptions to that kind of stuff, especially during wartime. When enemy scientists are recruited or they defect to the other side.
Yeah.
And in a lot of those cases, if someone is a non-citizen, they're probably going to be fast tracked to citizenship. It just like
Yeah.
if they're working, if they're that integral to a project and the military wants that, they're gonna do what they can to make that happen. And damned any red tape, they'll just push someone through.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean,
So
because military in the U.S. Gets a lot of leeway when it comes to following.
yeah, and so giving all this here, it's like okay, well then he had to have had some kind of fast track to citizenship, or he was a citizen in the first one. So it's like, why is he then? Yeah, I obviously, as you said, it's as a vehicle to do the whole like getting Johnny Five his citizenship, U.S. citizenship at the end of the movie.
And I feel
Essentially,
like there's a billion ways you could have done this without having Ben be getting his citizenship at the same time, but that's the way they chose to go with it. So that's what we're kind of stuck with in the movie.
yeah.
So I starting with my first big plot hole issue is really more of a kind of a generic issue that's happened across both movies. It wasn't as I feel like I feel like in Short Circuit 2 it's a lot worse than it was in the first one. But Johnny Five has these like random technologies and powers that he uses, and they do a pretty good job of like at least like doing the Chekhov's gun thing where they bring them up before they use them, so it's not all the time. Only a few of the times is it some kind of like what do you call it?
A
Some kind
surprise.
of yeah. It's only a few times is it really a surprise. They usually kind of line everything up, but at the same time, it's like okay, so like uh just from the get go, we meet him. He's been shipped to Ben in this crate that just barely fits him and is rest of the way filled with packing peanuts. Somehow, from inside the crate that he barely fits inside, he is able to move the crate into the building, which he can't see, but he moves the crate into the building before pushing the crate open. He does things like when he's putting together toys, he's building the first toy. They show close-ups of him doing stuff, building the first toy, and one of those close-ups is him using a screwdriver attachment. But all he does is he puts the toy together, and then he touches the screwdriver to where the screws would be, and magically it's done. He doesn't do anything else with it. He just kind of touches it. I get it. That's part of like the whole like that's probably part of the whole that would have been really difficult to show in puppetry for the movie,
Yeah.
but at the same time it looks really goofy to me. He has a now in this movie he has a remote tool that allows him to remotely control seemingly any technology, which includes the mini Johnny Five toys that he builds. He makes some of them dance. Then he during the when he's helping Ben on his date in big air quotes with Sandy, he disables the bus's ignition system on the bus that Sandy's on. And then he also controls a big lighted sign to communicate with him. And that's just the
Now
remote.
so here's the problems I have with that remote thing, right? Its range and capabilities are fluid, because at the very end, and don't get me wrong with the whole the boat thing, right? Because he's got the remote control stuff. He can control things remotely. Like you said, he
Right.
could shut down that bus's ignition system when he's like screwing with them. When he pops up from one of the manhole covers and is like twirling around with the car, like he's controlling all the systems in there. Like they think that there's like low fuel and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
he's got control over various systems. But then like the boat he can't control the boat.
He can't.
It's like
Yeah,
it's out
he
of
can disable the
frequency
ignition on a bus, but he can't disable the ignition on a boat, which would have left
on a boat.
Oscar just floating in the middle of the bay, right?
Well, then he's got that grapple, the magnet grapple thing, which he's used
Yeah.
a couple of times. Like on that taxi, he
Yep.
uses it to pull a taxi back. Why not use that for the boat?
Well, okay, so that I get because Oscar's in a smaller boat that if you look at it, it's probably fiberglass hull. So
The magnet wouldn't work as a
so the magnet wouldn't work.
grapple,
Whereas like
but,
the taxi in the 80s
okay,
is definitely made out of steel. So
100%. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that makes a little bit of sense. But at the same time, it's like, what? Yeah, exactly. Why don't you? I mean, the ignition in that's going to be just as electronic as the ignition on the bus.
Yeah.
There's not going to be some magical computer system that is controlling the ignition on the bus that wouldn't be similar to what they used on the engine in the boat. Uh, and so it's like, yeah, it's just it's like a there's all the stuff they already kind of contrived this like whole thing where he can control stuff, and then they're like, okay, well now he can't just magically stop the boat though. That's the thing. So I think the other side. Okay, so the remote is a big. I feel like that's the biggest piece of technology he has. That's like it's definitely a what do you call it? It's definitely a MacGuffin. Just a black box that fixes everything magically. But he also, on top of that, has another box that fixes everything magically. He's the toolbox he used to replace the laser with. He shows off really early on, like an umbrella popping out of it and stuff. And then when he stops the taxi cab, that magnetic grapple he has comes out of the toolbox and stuff. And we see the inside of it a couple of times too. And they also put his
the
books
hang
in it.
glider as well.
Yeah, so
in the book. Yeah.
I feel like the hang glider, they're trying to imply that he had it in the toolbox, but the hang glider is like the hang glider is the same size as him if you folded it down, right? So I'm like, where did they store that? But yeah, so he's got this like bat utility belt of stuff in this box what is a regular sized toolbox for the time. And it just there's like I think you mentioned like you mentioned it. He had the spectroanalyzer thing too for the tire treads, right?
Yeah, and so that's okay. Spectro analyzer is what he says, right? Not spectrum or spectral. Because I was like, maybe it's possibly that, but those, kind of, but don't work exactly what he's trying to do.
Right.
Yeah, spectro analyzer. It's not a real thing, but sounds plausible. Spectro is definitely not a real thing. Period. But yeah, it's used to ID the tire tread pattern, to ID the tires and the vehicle. And now this is the same vehicle that he saw Oscar and the crooks get in as they were leaving the warehouse before, which is the same one that they then used to turn around and then run him over. But he needs to ID them with the tire tread pattern.
He can't find that vehicle without the tire tread.
Okay.
Tire treads are very important for finding cars. I don't know if you know this or not, Dirty. You can't find a car if you don't know its tire tread pattern.
Yeah. I mean, he lists off exactly the type of tire it is, the manufacturer and everything, but somehow from that he's able to determine what car it is. I mean, don't be wrong, he knows what car it is, again, because I said he got ran over by it before and saw it, so he should know that. He shouldn't need the tire to ID it. What was the whole point of that? So
it was just an extra. I think it was it's one of those things, because I feel like they do this a lot in both movies. Is like they throw in things that don't necessarily matter to show that he's a robot and he does robot things. And robot things include identifying things based off of other weird details, right?
Yeah. Does being a robot also involve getting lost from your point of origin?
Well, and the fact, so he gets lost.
Even though you've got the perfect robotic recall,
well,
but you need directions to the warehouse from the guy who's eating at the bank that's across the street from the warehouse started at. Right? He can just turn his head and go, "Oh, there's the warehouse I'm looking for," because he started there. Like,
instead, he asks random old man who is key to the plot, to help him. So, like, that's the other thing. Like, he left the warehouse of his own volition too, so it wasn't like Like I could give it a pass if it was like, oh, someone kidnapped him, put him in a van, and then drove him away somewhere, and now he's wandering the city. But in this case,
Yeah,
it's like,
he
no,
didn't know he
he
was in the
literally,
city, right? Obviously, that was how, a big thing. Okay, he didn't know he was in the city. Yeah,
but
that's
still,
plausible.
he
But
actually
now he knows
like,
he's in the city. He's
yeah,
outside. He sees street signs. He's got a fucking robot memory.
right. Well, he's only got 500 megabytes, so he's got to keep
500
enough for
megabytes.
his
Yeah,
personality. He can't be
it's
recording
true.
every address he came from that he wants to get back to eventually.
You
So
need all those Three Stooges episodes, those Tarzan
the
movies,
Tarzan,
those Maniac Mike commercials. Those are
not
very
Maniac, it's
crucial.
Manic Mike. Thank
Manic?
you very much.
Is it Manic?
It's
Sorry.
Manic. Oh,
I
I
think I
know.
said Maniac because I think someone called him Maniac. That's why. And then
That's
okay.
yeah.
I think it was Ben, which
Well,
makes
and
sense why
he
Ben would
has a
call him
very
Maniac.
even though his name is Manic Mike, he's definitely acting like a maniac. So it's
Yeah.
definitely it fits.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. More Johnny Five stuff. Like so his ability to travel faster in the sewers. So like he gets sewer fast travel powers
right?
somehow because he read the utility maps in the bookstore. And that somehow imparts him with the ability to travel faster in the sewers than cars can go on pavement over the same
Right.
distance.
Well, I mean,
Like,
because everyone
I'm
knows that
sorry, but like
sewers are a shortcut. You can't
they're
beat someone who is
well,
traveling by sewer if you're traveling by
it's a
city
series of
street.
tubes, right?
It's the tubes. It's the internet.
Yeah. I mean, it's like one of those vacuum tube systems. Like, he just got in one of those capsules, him just shooting around
Shoots
everywhere. Yeah.
around the city.
Clearly, because there's no possible way a robot with tank treads can navigate the sewers with varying levels of
Well, and I'd point out that they didn't mention it in this
topography, I would
movie.
imagine,
They didn't
and
mention it in
pipes
this
and whatnot.
movie, but they mentioned it in the first one that he's got like a top speed of like 20 or 22 miles per hour. So it's like, yeah, it's like even if he had shortcuts, like they're driving around in a car, like okay, let's assume there's
Yeah.
traffic, let's assume they get slowed down. Like the idea that a robot whose top speed is like 22 miles an hour can catch up to and beat a car who's been traveling for a very long time because the it took time for Fred to fix him and then for him to fix himself and then for him to finally go out after them. Like
Yeah.
yeah, so they had like at least let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that scene of him fixing himself was really quick. And they got an hour head start. Yeah, a robot doing 22 miles an hour is gonna catch up to that car.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Thank
But
God
yeah,
for
so
sewers.
one other thing is like, with all that, like he's got all that knowledge, like map knowledge and stuff. And I think you all also like bring it up later when you want to talk about some of his morals,
His morality.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing that is here, it's like it's he's got all this knowledge that he got, assuming from the bookstore.
Yeah.
And so when he breaks into the Heimdall bank, like he recognizes like, oh, this is a Heimdall bank vault. And then he even like recognizes like, I could, give him the benefit of the doubt, like there's a label on the collection of jewels that says Vanderveer collection on it.
Not that we
But
see
he
at
seems
least.
to understand what the Vanderveer collection is, though, which means like he read some kind of news article or an encyclopedia when he was in that bookstore that mentioned them, like because he seems to have some kind of recognition of the Vanderveer collection. It's like, okay, and he knows like this is the bank and it's the bank vault, but he somehow he'll just still dig and act surprised, like it's like I don't know what's happening, like that
Well,
whole
like
like digging towards it while pretending he doesn't know what's going on, and then being surprised Pikachu when it's like, oh, this is the Heimdall bank vault for the bank across the street. What?
yeah,
Like what? You
like
knew
this
that.
is
You
a
knew because you
surprise.
knew the plans. Like you have the map of the city. What's going on here?
So I'm gonna jump ahead because we're already starting to talk about it a little bit. So I'm gonna jump ahead in our little thing. We'll get back to this other plot point in a moment. Or the other one I wanted to go to, but for now let's start with Johnny Five's understanding of right versus wrong in this movie is I understand. I get it. That the whole idea is that he is very childlike. He's innocent, he hasn't experienced these things. And so his grasp of right and wrong isn't great. But numerous times throughout the movie, he shows he understands that stealing is wrong. He shows that he understands that, selling someone without them participating in that is wrong. Like slavery is wrong. Like he understands all these things, but to go along with this, what
Actively
Oscar using him,
participates in them. Yeah.
he actively participates in some crazy stuff. So the first off, uh, the Los Locos gang, who again I just want to point out, they have a theme song and they sing it at empty lots before they do crimes. I just want to again point that out. they these guys who do that are smart enough to convince Johnny Five that they're not stealing anything, that they are doing a job where they're replacing these radios in
Yeah, they're the
cars.
Department of Car Stereo Repair.
Car stereo repair.
Yeah.
And while I will absolutely give Johnny Five some credit in the sense that, like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, like if you don't have a full grasp of the world and you are accepting of a lot of things that just come at you, then yeah, I mean, this seems, pretty. I mean, they made a convincing argument for someone who doesn't understand what theft is. But in my head, I'm thinking, okay, so Johnny Five. First off, we have seen him on TV or on the movie, on the previous movie, read an entire encyclopedia, read the entire dictionary, go through a massive amount of input just in the first movie alone. Not to mention the fact that he clearly has had more input since then because he's got
2 years worth,
Well, he's got like Greenpeace stickers and a Nike swoosh, and he talks a lot about the things that he's learned and stuff. And so they're he may be childlike, but he's accumulating knowledge at such a fast rate that it feels really weird that there's a disconnect.
He's implausibly naive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or like he would have seen something or read something about how, any of this works and not be as easily tricked by people.
All of the legal codes in every state, in every country, probably in a half hour. Like,
because he read an entire encyclopedia in like 20 minutes.
Well, he even claimed that he can go back to that big giant bookstore and finish it off in 30 minutes. Like, it'll only take me 30 minutes to go back there and crush all those books. It's like, okay, well then he's got to be able to have, he has to have seen laws and have,
and understand, and he expresses like, hey, this thing is wrong in a couple of cases, slavery being a big one of them. And it's like, so he clearly understands that, hey, he understands that there's a right and a wrong, and he kind of has a grasp on what things are wrong and why they're wrong. Because every time he talks about stealing stuff where he realizes that it's actually stealing stuff, he's like, he reasons it out for the most part. So like when he's talking to Oscar about the diamonds and stuff, he's like talking about how taking them is wrong. And so you get that, like, it's weird that you get the sense that he knows right from wrong, but they're trying to play up that child like naivete.
Yeah, because like Oscar just goes, "Oh, don't worry, they're mine. They're actually mine." He's like, "Oh, Oscar owns the Vanderveer collection," and he's like, "Yeah, I do. Okay, let's move on." Like,
so I feel like they confuse a lot of, because I feel like there's a difference between like being naive and being gullible, and I feel like a lot of the times what they want to show is that he's naive, but they end up leaning on the fact that he's gullible because that's just how it's an easy way to talk him into doing stuff is to make him really gullible, make him not necessarily just naive, like he is still naive, but like naive to the point where someone can in a very simple terms explain it to him in a way that makes him go, oh, okay, this isn't wrong. And so like I think another good example of this is the fact that when Oscar gets him to dig the tunnel, his first response to Oscar saying, hey, we want to dig this tunnel is, oh, but we need permits to dig this tunnel in New York. It's like, and then Oscar just goes, oh, I got the permits. And then he's totally fine with it after that point. Yeah. And like, I think you brought it up too. Like he's read utility maps clearly. He's done a bunch of stuff at this point, and he understands like what he's doing and where he's at. And like the fact that he doesn't realize that Johnny Five doesn't put two and two together, that this is what's happening in the face of very simple explanations from other people. Like you said, Oscar telling him like, oh, well, this is mine, and he's like, oh, you own this collection. Oh, that's crazy. And it's like, that's that's slipping out of naivete and more into just straight up gullibility. Like,
Yeah.
and yes, it's they're trying to make him more infantile and innocent. Like they're trying to make it so that he's, you know, uncorrupted by humans at this point, because he hasn't been, you know, his life has been spent with two people for the most part. You know, his sentient life has been spent with two people, and whatever knowledge he can dig out of, you know, the books he can get or the TV he's been able to watch. So I feel like, but I feel like that is the case where, like, okay, so, you know, two years into his life, he has probably already consumed more information than most adults have, and I feel like there's
Yeah.
it's really implausible in my mind that he has not run across any kind of moral conundrum that would make him understand that what he was doing with the tunnel was wrong, or that what he was, you know, everything that he did that was kind of wrong up until that point. Like I feel like it's a stretch to imagine that he hasn't seen anything that would have kind of indicated that. I think, you know, going back to the slavery aspect of it, like Fred tries to basically stop him from leaving, and basically, you know, is telling him the same thing that Ben has been kind of telling him. But he's like, he immediately identifies that, oh, what Fred wants is for me to be a slave, and that's wrong. And then Fred trying to sell him, oh, Fred's trying to sell me, and that's essentially slavery. That's wrong. You know, so he sees these things and he knows that they're wrong, but that the other things that come up that are wrong that he does just get nothing more than it's easily hand waved by anyone around him, essentially.
Yeah.
He also steals the clothes that he walks around in.
Yeah.
So
a red beanie with stripes on it and some tan button-up shirt. And
button-up shirt or jacket or something. Yeah.
Really awkwardly on him. Yeah.
Right. So, so
trying to fit in, but sticking out like a sore thumb. It's a robot wearing clothes. It looks kind of odd.
Well, because
it does. It gets a lot of looks, you know.
That comes shortly after too the him being critiqued by the people in the park looking at the statues.
Yeah, looking
so
repulsive. Because he wants to fit in, and so he tries to fit in. And what's funny is he's like obliviously strolling down the street wearing these clothes, like, look at me, I fit in now.
He's
and everyone's
like, see, I'm a human now. It's cool.
Everyone's like, either like they're in awe because it's a robot, or they're laughing because the absurdity of a robot wearing clothes. And it's like,
right.
But he is aware that he failed at it, though. There is that. So he does become aware later that he did fail in that attempt. But in the moment, he's just like, ha ha ha, Emperor's new clothes kind of thing, you know.
Which I feel like that personally, like that fits the vibe of innocent childlike, you know, like he sees something that to him makes him look human, and he's totally fine with that until, you know, he gets it, until he feels that way until someone points it out, or I think Ben is talking to him about it, like after he comes back. And obviously people are jeering at him on the street still and all that stuff. So it's like, but it just like that, I kind of buy as the like, oh, this is, you know, he is not world experienced yet. He has not experienced all of the horrors that humanity has to offer. And so like, I kind of see the innocence and the, you know, infantilism coming through in that, but in his other right, you know, chances to determine what's right and what's wrong, it feels so scattered. And so I think the last plot hole we got here is I just want to point out that Sandy is really bad at toys, like really bad. It's mentioned that she's had this job for 2 months. And she hasn't actually purchased anything. She is a assistant buyer for this large toy chain, or at least large toy store in New York. And they kind of line up like, they kind of make her boss seem kind of like he just doesn't want to have fun, but she's really bringing him dumb stuff, like a hat with hands on it that clap. Like, I don't even know what to say about that stuff. Yeah, it's novel. He actually calls it. He says we're a toy store, not a novelty. We don't sell novelties. And I feel like that's exactly what's going on. Is Sandy is like picking up every novelty bit she can find and going like, oh, look, it's a toy. And then she's very half-heartedly trying to sell it to her boss as a toy, and it just does not work at all. Like, how do
Yep.
you? I'm curious. This makes me really curious too, because like I feel like if this is at all representative of the '80s, could you just like walk off the street and get an assistant toy buying job in the '80s? Like she had to have some experience that made them want to hire her, right? Like I don't, I'm at a loss for that. Of just how bad she is at her job,
Really
and
bad. Well, so like another point was like her boss. I don't know if it's that same scene with the clapping hat thing, or it's one of the fingers. It's the one with the weird fingers, and like he's her boss is going in on the credibility of Ben. Like, who is this like guy who's like trying to like con you and stuff, and she like
because
starts vehemently like defending him, like he's a robotics engineer and blah blah blah, and then he shows up and she just pretends like he's the delivery boy instead of like letting him speak for himself. She's like,
well, she's trying to protect this because this is like the one her entire career hinges on Ben being able to deliver these toys. Because this is the one
yeah,
toy she's been able to find. Which, by the way, I'd point out she didn't find it; walked into her
it walked
office.
into her office. Yeah,
So this is the one toy that like her boss has kind of been cool with. And so she's trying to defend that toy to her boss, and then is also at the same, like, yeah, exactly, like you said, she's talking up Ben and what he does, and then doesn't want Ben to talk to her boss at
yeah,
all. like it's gonna, like, Ben's gonna be the one that ruins this, and it's like, oh man, oh, this like I don't know, like, how do you get a job as someone whose entire purpose is to purchase things in bulk and negotiate those deals and not have some concept of what a good thing for your company is. It just boggles my mind. It also boggles my mind that she's working kind of solo on a lot of this stuff. Like, I feel like if you've only been in a job for 2 months, you're probably like, even the most self-sufficient people have like, either peers or maybe their boss works a little closer with them. But this seems like her boss is basically like, well, buy toys and I'm going to come by and check on you every week or two. And hopefully you've got toys that are actual toys that I want to sell, and we'll go from there.
yeah. There is one thing I did want to revisit, going back
Okay.
to like you mentioned Johnny Five's random powers controlling the mini Johnny Fives, and you
Yeah.
made a note about the beginning of the movie where this is like kind of the opening of the movie after they get through the whole jewel bit and they cut to Ben selling the toys. They got these little mini Johnny Fives running around, or number fives, I guess. And they're all running around, and you said like they seem to have some kind of sentience, and I think that's almost like the one that gets away and that leads to Sandy's office, the one that she recognized, like, oh hey, this is a toy, and she goes and finds Ben. One, how did she find Ben? Like
Right?
the robot just like, but so anyways, yeah, that's how it links to this whole. But anyways, going back to that even more, like, one thing I did notice, like that whole sequence of that one mini number five wandering off, it almost is kind of like it's an homage to the first movie when he first gets sentience and he's bumping into shit and inadvertently escaping the military facility through all these like random happenstance, like, oh, I just happened to land on this truck and stuff. And it's the same kind of thing happens to this whole journey of this mini
Of the
number
mini five.
five.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to the point where like one of the first things that happens when he wanders in is he runs into a wall, just like Johnny Five does in the first movie, and like, oh, and then gets his bearings and then continues on. And so it's almost kind of not necessarily shot for shot, but it is kind of almost
It,
shot for
it
shot,
is.
like
I
an
definitely get that.
homage.
I didn't actually think about that
Yeah, and
beforehand. Now
all
that
the
you mentioned it,
little
though, I
like
definitely see it.
Rube Goldberg journey throughout the department store. Like he falls on these different things that just happen to be passing by this thing, and so he gets on a counter because it passes by a counter, and then it's this whole journey stuff.
I
It's really
so
reminiscent of the first movie.
and to talk about that just a slight bit more. The reason they look like they have sentience in this, like, or at least in this particular scene, it's like the way that the mini number 5 works. It looks like it's almost experiencing the thing, or like, because like there's a scene where it's like rolling across the countertop and there's all these like glasses and you assume it's gonna like knock them over or something like
Yeah.
that, and it doesn't, but it reaches its hand out and taps a couple of them, and it's like I feel like that makes me
Well,
feel
and
like, oh,
Ben
this
talks to
little
them,
robot
you
is
know?
like yeah, and it makes me feel like these robots are like experiencing the real world, and so that in turn makes me go like, okay, so they didn't develop the sentience in Johnny Five. Johnny Five developed sentience on his own after a lightning strike. Um, how complicated are these miniature robots that he's making, and why are they only
Very,
like $50 a piece? Like even in
very.
'80s money, like a miniature sentient robot being $50 a piece feels a
If
little
Johnny
cheap.
5 was 11 million, I'd probably say those things would probably 22 million, you know, because of the whole
Because they're
having to scale
smaller,
down. Yeah.
which
Trying to
I
find
don't.
the components to scale down.
I feel like this is a movie that doesn't understand that the scaling down of robotics and electronics is a very expensive endeavor.
Yeah. Yep.
All right,
There's a
so
reason why we're running around with computers in our pockets right now with
right,
high def screens. When back when this movie came out, we had CRT monitors and giant brick sized uh, wireless phones that
well, and pocket calculators
unwieldy.
with little solar panels in them were not
Yeah.
quite as prominent as they were in the '90s. So
Anyway, so yeah, I think that's all of our holes.
I
Did
think
we
that's
miss
everything we got written
anything?
down, at least.
Of course we missed everything.
Of course.
Yeah, no, I bet you thought we were going to get through this episode without mentioning it, but just as a reminder that we won't be covering everything wrong and every plot hole we find in the movies we cover. All the episodes just end up hours longer than we want them to be. So if you think we missed something, we didn't. We're just keeping things brief, picking out the items that we want to discuss. So, and you
But
probably also
but
thought we were going to forget about to shout out our channel, but
oh yeah.
if there is something that you want to point out that we left out of this episode, please go to our YouTube channel after we've uploaded the episode and leave that plot hole in the comments. Our channel is at the plot holes, all one word. And while there, please take a moment to hit those subscribe and like buttons. And
Yeah,
now
thank you
on
very
to the
much.
trivia.
All right, my favorite part. Mostly because I write it. At least part of it. So this was so I don't know if you remember, but I believe the first movie had something like a budget of like 15 million or something like that, and it made making about 40 million in the box office. This one also had a budget about 15 million. It only made 21 million at the box office, so this was definitely a much worse performer than the first movie. Um, the so I feel like that contributes to the fact that we didn't see a Short Circuit 3, because I think that this was like, even though this wasn't as popular at the box office, it, like I said, it got a lot of TV play, and that I think kind of endeared kind of our generation to it. So I feel like we could have easily seen another movie if this one hadn't had done so poorly in the U.S. box office. For our
And there's
oh
talks about like doing reboots and a sequel and
oh
stuff,
yeah,
in the past, since ever. But
wasn't there a cartoon
I
too?
think it's just it never. I think it was like you said, it's just the whole nostalgia thing, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what really got people wanting to do it. It's the nostalgia. It's not necessarily that it performed well.
Yeah. So I feel like this has basically survived off of the TV showings that it had. It survived in our memories based off the TV showings that it's had. Um,
100%.
so surprise actors. We already covered a few, so like because we got Fisher Stevens returning. We got the voice of Johnny Five is the same guy that did before, and he's done a lot of voices and other stuff. So I'm not going to talk too much about them, but we do
Keen, yeah.
Oscar Baldwin. Yeah, Michael McKean's in this, which I would have brought up, but this is like probably the worst movie that Michael McKean's ever been in.
This is the
Uh,
first movie I've ever seen Michael McKean in.
Well,
and
he was,
he was a complete douche in it. And then the
yeah.
next movie I saw with him was Coneheads, which he was also
Oh
a
man,
complete douche in. So my
I
first
feel like that's a vast
experiences
majority of
watching
his
it,
early career is being a douche, though.
yeah, yeah,
Because yeah, I feel like until we started seeing the what's his name movies, Waiting for Guffman and Mighty Wind and all those that guy's movies. God, oh my God, my brain is not working well right now. Until we saw those movies, we didn't start seeing like the softer side of Michael McKean. Um, although I guess his turn on SNL was pretty good
well,
too, and
and
whatnot.
then
So
on The Good Place, he plays this guy that's just like the epitome of goodness.
right, yeah,
Like,
like to a fault for sure,
yeah, to a
right?
fault, exactly. Like
So
I think it's like he ends up going to the bad place because he's just so good that it's broken. Well,
yeah,
they
yeah,
find
that
out the
the
system's broken or
scoring was
something.
broken in
Sorry,
yeah,
spoilers
was
for
showed
Good
off. Oh
Place.
yeah, we'll cover that in a Good Place show. I'm sure we'll eventually get around to doing the Good Place.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, I
but
didn't
it's
want. I was gonna bring him up because he's not surprised. You see him, everyone knows who he is. You might not know his name, but you've seen him in tons of stuff.
yeah.
He's a pretty prolific actor, but there's a couple that were kind of a surprise to me. So Oscar Baldwin in this movie, the guy who works at the bank who is leading the robbers, is played by Jack Weston. Who as an actor, I don't know Jack Weston too well. He has been in a lot of stuff though. Holy crap! He's a comedic actor who's been in a lot of things like even like Dirty Dancing and the original Thomas Crown Affair. But he was also one of the main characters in The Incredible Mr. Limpet, which was that was the Don Knotts movie where Don Knotts played a fish, a guy who transforms into a
Fish. Yeah.
fish. Yeah, one of those early crossover movies with animation and live action that Disney was doing. So that was I like he looked familiar, but I didn't like know him as an actor until I was looking that up. So that was pretty interesting. We also got Gerard Parks, who is in this movie, he is the priest. He's not given a name. He's just the priest that Johnny Five confesses to before getting arrested. And like Gerard Parks, like I don't think anyone's gonna recognize that name, but
You will recognize his
anyone of
face
our
for sure. If you're
generation
an
will
80s
recognize
kid,
his
yeah.
face. Especially because he was Doc from Fraggle Rock, which that in and of itself, that's why I mean I immediately recognized him as something that I remembered, but once I looked him up, I was like, oh, that's Doc from Fraggle Rock. Once I saw a picture of him that was him not as a priest, it made more sense. I didn't remember that the guy's name. I didn't remember that his name in Fraggle Rock was Doc, but you do research and you find
Yeah.
these things out.
Well, if you said Doc from Fraggle Rock, and my brain immediately, oh, holy crap, that is him.
Right?
My brain like it totally sees like when he's doing his rant against Johnny Five, and like you see the expression on his face. I'm like, that is the guy from Fraggle Rock. Holy crap!
He's also I would call him the guy from Fraggle Rock whose dog looked
The
exactly
only
like him.
human. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
His
Yes.
Muppet dog looked very much like him,
Yep.
with the shaggy eyebrows and everything. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So the last one I want to bring up here is Manic Mike is played by Don Lake, who is he's got some really great lines from some very funny movies, and you would instantly recognize him if you Google him. So I highly recommend Googling Don Lake. But
He's crazy. That guy.
well, and he was in for the life of me I can't remember which exchange he's in, but he's one of the air traffic controllers in like Airplane or Airplane 2.
Wasn't he also in Wayne's World 1, the guy that invented the suck it?
Oh, he might have been the
Suck
guy that
cut?
invented the suck cut. It
Yeah.
certainly sucks. um, he's been in a bunch of stuff. He's like a comedy actor who's been in like a billion different things and like a lot of satire. But I think like one of my favorite claims to fame of his is he is in the last movie that the last movie. Okay, so I have to be clear on this because there's some difference here, but I believe this was the last movie that was released, not the last movie they starred in, but the last movie that was actually released for both Chris Farley and John Candy, and both of those were movies about the creation of the American West. One was Eastbound or East. Eastward Bound or something. Oh god damn, I should have written these down. I totally forgot. Uh, but yeah, both of them were about like exploring, either moving to the American West or exploring the American West. I believe Chris Farley's was he was a tracker. Um, but yeah, Don Lake was in both of those, which really it goes to show that he was a staple in 80s and 90s comedies, I think. And yeah, if you see him, you would recognize him. He's just been in a lot of stuff. A lot of bit parts, a lot of big gags. He's a big part of that.
He was
Um,
not in Wayne's World. My brain made that up.
oh, that makes me a little sad now.
Yeah.
But he was in a lot of. He's been in a lot of things. Like I'm pretty sure he was in Airplane. I'm pretty sure he was one of the air traffic controllers in Airplane. And he had one of the back and forths with what's his name? He was in Police Academy. He was in the Hot Shot movies. Older, more distinguished actor who switched to comedy, much like Leslie Nielsen. Man, I need to write this stuff down more. This is disappointing. Disappointing.
Anyway, anyway,
Moving on. So that's it. That's the short list. There's other actors in this that were kind of like I've seen them in other stuff, but I feel like those were the key ones, the key takeaways from this one in particular.
Yep.
So I think you had something about the
And
newspaper articles that we see. Is this the montage at the end?
yeah, we
Okay.
see like at the end, Johnny Five is revived with the defibrillator to sad Minecraft music. Even though it's a good happy moment, it's sad Minecraft
It's
music.
sad. It's
Anyways,
still sad.
so immediately after that, we jumped into the future and we see a bunch of like news articles that showed pictures of Johnny Five. And then there's like, the headlines for him, and he makes some of the headline articles on there, and he's on the cover on some magazines. So I
Nice.
stopped some of them to like look on here, and like the LA Times was one, the Times Picayune was the first one that pops up. And I paused the movie to try and see if I can read any of the text, and I actually could make out some of it. And it is actually detailing events from the movie, which I'm surprised that they didn't just like slap the picture on there, change a headline, and then just like done. No, they actually took the time to like add in a little article that's detailing what happened, or like why there's an article about this robot. It's like, he foiled a jewelry heist and all this stuff. And that's the same case on a number of these newspapers that are shown. But the first one that's shown, it is there is a weird flub that's off. There's in that one article,
Mm-hmm.
it's titled "What Is It?" And it goes on. The first part of it is definitely talking about the events in the movie, and then it gets to the bottom of the page, and then there's the fold in the newspaper, and then the column that's next to it is no longer. It's in the same article box,
But
but
it's
it's
not the same
talking
article.
about Nicaraguan rebels in a ceasefire. And then it also bleeds into something about Northwest Airlines Flight 255, which was a big tragedy that happened at that time in September. Because the date on all of these are the same. It's Tuesday, September 22nd, 1987. That's when all these magazine articles are shown. So that's the
Okay.
end of the movie is when the date is. So the movie presumably took place in the week/month or two before that. Which is understand, like they were talking about like we need to get these done before holiday season so we can meet the I guess like Halloween in November so they can start selling it for the holiday
Yeah,
season.
they
Like that
wanted
was
it
the
mid
deadline.
October, right? For
Yeah.
to be able to sell it for Christmas was
Yep.
the goal.
Yeah, so they met their goal. Surprise, they definitely hit their time goal. September 22nd. So definitely
And
like
then by
a
then they had a full company made up, a big building that they
yeah.
owned, their own logo. Michael McKean was dressing in nice suits and talking on a cell phone.
Yep. So yeah, so that was kind of interesting. Yeah, a lot of the other articles like they really were just focused on Johnny Five. They didn't have anything else that was going on.
Nothing else that like
Uh,
popped out at you as
yeah,
going like, "Whoa,
it-
that's weird."
yeah, and they're all the same date, so that's kind of interesting that they gave it all the same date. It is surprising and not. It's not surprising because we then cut immediately to the newsstand, and the guy at the newsstand saying, "Yeah, I know that guy. He comes by and speed reads like crazy." you know. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's the newspaper thing I wanted to point out. There's also our little polyphonic soundtrack, the
Oh my!
clue order. Uh, yeah, if you're all interested, it starts off with a Beach Boys with "Help Me, Rhonda," and then I don't
This
know
is,
the
by the way,
artist for like.
this is how this is how Ben and Fred let Sandy know where they're at, and then Sandy gets help from a taxi cab driver, right? To
From Leningrad. Yeah, from the
decode these classic American rock hits to make up
he
instructions
knows
on how
them
to get to
all
them.
because of all the music on the black market in Leningrad.
Yeah.
Because this is taking place before
Before the
the
fall of the
collapse of the
wall.
Soviet Union. So yeah, like 4 years before, so it's 3 or 4 years before. So it's making cracks like that, like oh haha, black market stuff. When
Things
we
that
get all
make
the
no
good stuff
sense to
in the
people
black market.
nowadays, other than the fact that, oh, this guy's Russian.
Yeah. So yeah, just anyway. So this guy's helping her decode. Like he's the taxi cab driver. She's playing it on her answering machine because they there's no voicemail back in the '80s, folks. I hate to break it to you. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
We use little
she's got
tapes,
a answering
remember?
machine. Yeah. So they dial her answering machine and they're leaving clues in the form of music set to the dial tone, because they can't send Morse code and they can't speak. All they can do is get the tone through. So that's how they're communicating it. So they're doing it by playing out these songs on a keypad essentially, and on using the dial tones to uh, make the songs. Anyway,
To make
so
the songs. Yeah. So it starts with
the
Help Me,
orders of
Rhonda.
them: "Help Me, Rhonda." Next one is "On Broadway," and then the next one is "Downtown," and then the next one is "16 Candles." And then we get Dock of the Bay, and then the final clue is Doo Wah Diddy because they're in the Doo
They're
Wah
the Duwa
Chinese
Chinese
restaurant with them.
restaurant, right? Yeah. So first off, like, it's amazing that they were in a Chinese restaurant that also shared name with a popular '50s hit.
Yep. So yeah, that's I think that's all we've done today. I think we managed to poke enough holes in Short Circuit 2. Join us for the next episode. Will be this Friday. I know we've been kind of delayed here past couple weeks, but should be shooting for next Friday, or this coming Friday, the
This coming
26th.
Friday.
Yep. We will be poking holes at 2012's Looper. I'm Dirty Invincible,
And I'm Macron. And
and we're the plot
the plot
holes.
hole. Oh my god. Okay, we gotta like pay someone to help us with this eventually at some point.
The camera guy that nods.
Also, bad humans. All right, guys. See you
See you
later.
later.